if you can make your developers more productive and not lose 56%, they're like double as productive as they are right now. The open source project we launched in March. So after the enterprise, it has about 9,500 stars. So like that is going great. Just the number of people using it is spectacular. To open up a company, there's some like capital they have to put in. It wasn't big. It's like, what was the amount? $2,000-$3,000. But I had no money, like none. I think I took like a $1,500 loan at like a 25% like interest or whatever. It's a credit card loan. Like there was nothing. Like I had a credit card and that's the only way I could pull out the money. How many people did I talk to? When we closed the round, the party round, there's like 60 people in there. 60. For 60 people, I actually talked to 460 people, to be clear.
Okay, so welcome back to another episode of Default Global. Today we're diving into the world of developer tools with a founder who's no stranger to innovation, Ivan Burazin, co-founder and CEO of Daytona. Ivan's journey began with Code Anywhere Company and continued with the Shift Developer Conference, which grew from a local event to one of Europe's largest developer gatherings. After Shift's acquisition by Inforbip, Ivan launched Daytona, which is recently securing like $5 million in funding from top-tier investors, including the founders of Postman and Stack Overflow. So today we will explore how Ivan navigated his fundraising process and what this new venture means for the developer community. Ivan, we've got a lot to cover today, so welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Anything I missed that you would like to add to that introduction?
You said most of it. So Code Anywhere initially, then Shift, which is great, acquired by Infobip, left Infobip to start Daytona. Daytona, we raised 2 rounds, 2 and 5, a total of 7. And so here we are, okay. 16 months in and doing great.
Awesome. Okay, so to start us off, can you maybe share shortly the main problem that Daytona solves at this point, and maybe you can share some numbers you're comfortable with, like a company size, clients, milestones, just some highlights about Daytona's growth so far.
Sure. Daytona solves basically the way it started was to solve problems for very large enterprises. So companies that have very large developer teams. And they basically have 3 major problems that Daytona addresses. And the first one is developer productivity or happiness. So the time it takes to onboard a developer in these large enterprises is insane. Plus the time developers waste switching to or working with multiple projects, the time that they have around dev environment, they throw away around 56% of their productive time. I keep throwing out this stat everywhere, but it's surprising how large of a stat that is. We think of like, if you can make your developers more productive, like, and not lose 56%, they're like double as productive as they are right now. So that is a non-trivial amount of productivity, but it's not always productive. It's just like happiness. Like they don't have to deal with like these things that they have to deal with. The other thing is the constraints of the actual machine that they're on. And so I was talking to another investor the other day, and we were talking, and they didn't invest in Daytona, but we were talking about it at some point. And it's like, you know what? When we were talking, I did not expect 6 months later that every computer in the world is going to have a GPU because of AI. And now they have to. And how do you solve this? Well, you're not going to switch out all these computers. You're going to give them remote dev environments, right? And so how do you give them remote dev environments? Right now, you can give them an EC2 on AWS or, on DigitalOcean, whatever. But that is just work for the developer to ask for it, works for the DevOps team to enable it, and then it takes an even longer time to get up and running. So can you automate all this ability to set up a dev environment at scale? And the last one is security. Because these large enterprises, some of them specifically have to have the source code secure behind their firewall on servers that they own and not on the local machine. It is how do they offer that to the developer right now in a really great experience? Well, the answer is they can't. And so that is basically what Daytona does from those basically 2 things: developer productivity or happiness, scalability, and security. And that's what we offer as a product. We also do offer an open source thing for individual developers that just takes care of that productivity, and anyone can use that absolutely for free. It's open source. And so, yeah, that is Daytona.
Any kind of numbers that you are comfortable sharing, like size, clients, some highlights?
Sure. I mean, the company size, we're like 13, 14 people. We hired someone yesterday, I think, or 15. So we're not super fast at hiring. We're basically trying to be very much hire slow, fire fast type company, although that's so hard and everyone says that you should do that, but it's a very, very hard thing. So we're about 14 people right now. It's evenly split between the engineering org and the business org. Engineering org is what you expect, engineers. And the business org is, growth and sales and support and customer success and all these things. But for Daytona specifically, everyone has to be engineer because we are selling an engineering tool.
Right.
So it's
Right.
it's also very hard to get there. So if anyone engineering is looking for a non-engineering job, let me know, because these people are like unicorns, very hard. The open source project we launched in March, so after the enterprise, it has about 9,500 stars. So like that is going great. Just the number of people using it is spectacular. So we love that. The enterprise product itself is still sort of like in a private beta. It's not a V1, even though it is not a V1. We have a handful of customers, almost a dozen customers now, that are using it completely on-prem. We're not going out selling it. Don't want to churn out customers, but people can get on the wait list. They talk to us, and if Daytona, where it is, fits their use cases, we're more than happy to onboard them as customers. The customers that we have are from all different segments, but they are mostly what I call non-tech companies. So think of these very large organizations that is not a Facebook, not a Google, not a Netflix, but more a bank, a space, those insurance type
non-tech guys. Okay.
companies. Yeah.
I went. I read about how you took out a high interest credit card loan to start your first venture called Anywhere, right? So that kind of commitment and risks, that's inspiring, frankly speaking, just for me. So I know a lot of people wonder how founders make those first tough few steps. So maybe I would love to hear how that bootstrapping journey influenced you today. What did those early challenges teach you about business, startup, and maybe venture capital itself, and how have you shaped your approach as a founder today?
Oh, that's an interesting. No one has asked me that for a long time. You actually brought a flashback to my fate. Like I just remembered what that looked like right now.
Yeah.
And so we were gonna open up a company. And so to open up a company, there's some capital that you have to put in. It wasn't big. It's what was the amount? Like a couple thousand, $2,000-$3,000 you had to put in. But I had no money, like none. And me and my co-founder, and the only way to do it was, I think I took a $1,500 loan at a 25% interest or whatever. It's a credit card loan. There was nothing. I had a credit card, and that's the only way I could pull out the money. And today that seems, at least to where we are, that seems like nothing in the sense of venture capital. That's nothing. No one for $1,500, no one cares. But at that time, I was originally born in Toronto. I was raised, but I came to Croatia for school. And so as this fairly humble person living in Eastern Europe at that time, that was money I didn't have. And the only way to get it was that type of loan. And so that was I remember this right now, waiting in line. Are they going to give me that loan? It's just terrible. I'm signing the doc. It's 24% or whatever it was yearly APR, which was it's terrible. If anyone's doing that today, that's the most terrible thing you can do. But
Right.
It was the only way to get money. You couldn't get money, and I couldn't create a company. If I couldn't create a company, I couldn't do these things. And so fast forward, 15 years, things look much different. But it is, how do you get out of that, first, level where you're in? And I talked to someone about this the other day as well, is that there's so many stories about, how to start a company and how to raise money. And do you need a minimal viable product? Do you need customers? Do whatever? And I always say that very much depends, because if you are someone that, went to an Ivy League school or is very well connected, families are connected, you probably don't need a lot of things. Or you're a super smart kid that, whatever, hacked the PlayStation or whatever it was, then you have
Right.
all this attention, then you can raise money. But if you're just some rando that I was, living in a country that most people don't know existed, with zero money, zero experience, the schools you went to, you could have gotten the best school in that country. They don't know the country exists. So that school means nothing, right? So for you, you have to do so much more work to get to that. And I'm not saying I was in the worst position in the world. I've traveled quite a lot around the world in all sorts of countries. And I felt like I was very much privileged if you look at a grand scheme of things. Not privileged to someone living in Manhattan or in San Francisco or whatnot, but definitely privileged from someone living in some other countries. So you have to find the best way or the way out for what you want to achieve.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And now you're like running this well-funded venture-backed startups. So I know your backers include like founders of companies like Postman and Netlify and like a Stack Overflow. Which is like amazing, right? So how did your approach finding and choosing these investors this time?
Yeah, so it is all part of like, how can I utilize the skill set that I have? And so when we started Code Anywhere, it was like sort of successful, not really, whatever. Like there was people using it. And I started a developer conference because I liked going to conferences, because with Code Anywhere, we didn't know venture capital. We didn't know venture capitalists. We didn't know how to raise money. It was like way back then. So it's like 2012 or 11 or whatever. It's like, oh, venture capitals go to these startup conferences, then you can pitch on stage and you can do all these things. And so we ended up going everywhere, spending the last money we had to go and pitch on stage at these conferences. And I am not lying to you. At one point, my co-founder is like, this makes no sense. Like, this is all shit. You cannot go anymore. Like, we're not spending money. And then I spent my own money to go to a pitch to a VC. It was actually a VC, not even a conference. And I went there, and when I was flying back, I am not lying. So I paid the air flying ticket. I had a bit of money in my pocket. I had, driving to the airport, I was not sure I had enough for the taxi because there's no Uber at this time. Uber did not exist. And I paid the taxi. I had like a €50 in my pocket, or $1.50 equal to it. And I'm sitting in the airplane. I cannot buy a water. Like, I can't buy anything. And I have a layover to home. If anything happens, I cannot get home. Like, I don't know how to get out of this. I literally was that person. Luckily, we did not think that. We got a term sheet on that. And so I came back and told my co-founder, you know what? I still got a term sheet. So I got a term sheet. We ended up not taking that term sheet. We took it from someone else. But sorry, back to the conference. I digress. Is we went to all these conferences to pitch on stage, and we never got any money because we didn't know how to pitch. We didn't know the market. We didn't know a lot of things. But we did meet a lot of people, and just the energy at these conferences was amazing. And I ended up at one point saying, you know what, like, why don't do this in Croatia, because it doesn't exist. And so I started doing this conference thing, which also lost money for like the first 3 years, which is insane, but people liked it. And over time, it became my primary thing. So as sort of Code Anywhere sort of dried down, I ended up going full on and creating a business out of Code Anywhere, out of Shift, which is the conference, which is now like a 5,000 person, 6 stages, cocktails, Porsches, hamburger, DJ party, like very big type of conference. And so I built that as a bootstrap business. There I learned like enterprise B2B sales, because you're selling to sponsors. You're learning, B2C sales because you're selling tickets. You're figuring out community. And one thing that I did really well is that I met a bunch of these great founders, and some of them that are in Angels now were actually speakers at the conference at one point.
Oh,
some of them were not, but you ended up creating this real community around yourself of these like network of these people. And it's very common that you'll see people will start podcasts and conferences and all these things to create this network around yourself, basically. And I mean, the founder of Volt, the delivery service in Europe, which got acquired by DoorDash for whatever, he also ran, it's the co-founder of Slush, which is a great conference as well. So like, I don't know specifically him or like the connections to that, but I'm pretty sure that interviewing a bunch of VCs and founders and all these things at this conference adds to that network, because it gives you credibility that you don't have as someone that, either worked, Google, ex Google, ex Facebook, ex whatever, or ex McKinsey, ex EY, or ex Harvard or ex Stanford. Like, if you're not any of those, like, how do you make that network around yourselves. And that's the thing that I figured out by accident, that I didn't do it on purpose, but when I figured out, like, oh, okay, I know these people, they know me, they've seen me execute and create a business. Because when you come on stage and there's thousands of people watching you and you built that, I mean, that adds some credibility. It's like, you are not BS. Like, you flew the person to this place. They had a great time. It's like, you can execute, right? So it's also in the mindset of these people. It's like, this person can actually build something. Can they build this business? Maybe, maybe not. But can they build in general? Yes, they can. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, fundraising can be definitely brutal, and I interviewed like I don't know, dozens of founders, and we talked about number of meetings it took them to secure their first seed round. So speaking about your company, how many meetings did it take to secure your first and second round?
Yeah, the rounds are different, right? So the first round, we wanted to do a party round, in the sense we wanted to have a bunch of people in it. The second round was like an equity round by a prominent VC, which took most of the deal. So I ran them both differently, but I ran them as a process. So what people don't understand, and I didn't understand this as well, it's like, I love when people call me up now. People call me like, hey, how did you raise money? Like, can you help me raise money? And they're like, oh, I'm talking to this VC. We've been talking for like 6 months. We're really interested. I'm like, you're never getting money from that person. Like, never. That is not going to happen. Like, because I went through the same thing. So it is very much not, people think of it maybe more as today it might have changed, but when I was younger and dating, it was a different thing, right? You'd find one person, you'd be interested, then you talk to them, and then maybe something would happen, right? That is how a lot of people think about VC, and that's how I thought about it a long time ago. Now it is a sales process. So like, I have 3 months, I have this target, and so my pipeline is this big. I have to have this many meetings to close this many. So you're basically moving them down the pipeline. And the final is conversion. Do they buy a segment of your company? It is sales. There is a nuance to that sales where there is a relationship aspect to that. Have they seen you? Do they know you? And that is back to the conference. Like, do they know that you can execute these things and whatnot? And there's also the FOMO. Is like, if people are interested, then they're interested. And there's a lot of these things. So the first round we wanted to do a party round because the thing that Daytona is doing is changing slightly the way software development is done. And so we wanted as much clout around that, because if it's just Ivan and my co-founder Vedran doing this thing, we are not we're not popular enough to say this is this thing. Like, in the sense, like, some people might believe you, some people are not. But if you have the founder of every single dev tool company in the world that's successful on your cap table, then it's like, oh, well, maybe these guys know what they're talking about because these people are, behind them and backing them. So our idea was, we go after people. Some of them I know really well and respect. Some of them I don't know or hadn't known at the time. So how can I get people in the dev tool space that are really significant to be on my cap table? And our original plan was to go out and raise $1 million, irrespective of check size. So the minimum check size was $1,000, because we did it through AngelList. And so that's the minimum. And the maximum was whatever you want. And we ended up raising from, I think only one person did 1,000. Some people did 2,000. The average ticket was like 20,000. But we had people write $150,000 checks in the end, like individuals. But it was irrespective. Is like, I don't care how much money you put in. I just want you, and I want you specifically because of this, 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 and this. And that's a very, very, very different conversation. And so, also getting back to your question, how many people did I talk to? So we ended up, when we closed the party round, there's like 60 people in there, 60. Please note, do not, like, if you're going to have a lot of angels, put them in a special purpose vehicle. So use, AngelList or some tool, so that it ends up being one entity on your cap table. You do not want 60 different entities on your cap table. So, like, if any venture capitalist is listening to this, so they don't hate me, it's like, yes, we don't want 60 signatures on that. But if you do that, then it makes it very clean. And so for 60 people, I actually talked to 460 people, to be clear. So it is a lot of people that you talk to. And the way that we structured it, I'm actually writing an article about this right now. The public will be the pitch deck, and will be
Okay.
and the
Awesome.
flow and whatnot. So I am not going to talk about the business itself. Like, is the business good? Is the market there? Do you have like all those things? Like you can go figure that out on yourself. And so if that is good, then you have to like run a process. If that is not good, like no process is going to like change. It won't make sense. Right. And so the way I look at process is what you want to do is you want to do in a very, very short time, reach out to as many people as you can because everyone talks, right? And so you don't want to be like started in March and then you reach out to someone in August. Oh, I'm raising this round, because very soon they'll figure out that you talked to someone in March and like that means you just can't raise the money, right? So you want to like do it in a very, very short time, ideally in 2 weeks. It gets longer, but and then essentially in 2 weeks you want to go out and like reach out to these people. And so what I did is I made a list of people by tiers who I wanted and what my connection was. So it was like really hot, semi, okay, I want them. Not everyone I wanted. It wasn't anyone that I didn't want in there, but like there's like levels of hotness or whatever you want to call it, hype in there. And then you have what is my connection? Do I actually know the person? Do I have like a connection to that? And do I not know the person? Like there's no connection to that. And so what I tried to do is get the hot and known ones first and get those in. Why? Because when you shoot out cold emails to people you don't know or intros, is like, hey, my name is Ivan, I'm doing this thing. We're raising a round, but we already have, XYZ in the round. And we've already raised XY dollars. And that is the thing you want. It's like you don't want to be raising, it's like, oh, I'm raising $1 million and I've raised zero. Like you want to be already reaching out. I'm raising $1 million and I've raised 30%, or I've raised 40, or I've raised 50. And so that is what we did. And obviously the people that we knew well were the ones you got in first. It's like, we're doing this thing. And then you can sort of tie in the round amount in that. And so the people that you reach out cold the first week, some would reply, some didn't. The next week, you set a reply to the first email to everyone that didn't reply. And it's like, hey, maybe you skip my last email. We've raised 10% more, 20% more, 30, whatever. We've added these people. So we were like, oh, this person is not just like sending random emails. They're actually progressing. And if I don't answer this email, they will close the round without me, right? And so that is how we structured that whole thing.
Okay.
And so for us, it was like people we know really well first, then the people we know really well and how high level they were. And so we ended up raising or securing like 30% in like 3 days, 30%, like 300K in 3 days.
Okay.
And so that's great. And also that's handshake. It's not wired. It's not signed. It's like, yes, and some people end up flaking, but still like 30%, which is great. And then when you start shooting other people, it's like, oh, this is moving along. There is like a valley of death where it becomes slower. And a colleague of mine who created a company called wasp.dev also has a graph of this. It's like, that's great. And then people sort of like, oh, it hasn't got up to 50. You haven't been moving fast enough. And then sort of like drops down, the interest goes downwards till you get to about 70, 80%. When you're at that part, then people start replying. When you pass your mark, and that's why they always say, oh, I'm oversubscribed. When I passed the mark, then it just went insane. When we passed $1 million, we got to $2 million in 2 weeks. And we had to stop. It's like, I will not take any more money. We are done. Like, you don't want to dilute yourself as well too much. And so it's an interesting psychological effect that happens to there. And also people outside of your list start reaching out to you. You've never heard of these people. Cold LinkedIn's, cold emails. Hey, Ivan, I heard you guys are raising. You're oversubscribed. Can we write you a check? Literally, that is what you get after that. And the people that do that, it's like there's no due diligence at that point. Like, no one cares. Again, this is a pre-seed round. There's not much due diligence anyway. But it's like, we really want to write you a check. Can we give you the money? And it's such a mind-altering thing that you've never, as someone that, as you said, had to like get a credit card loan, 10 years prior, like people are like, please take my money. Here it is. Put it in your company,
money
right?
at you. Yeah.
Yeah. It is a very insane thing to happen. So that is, feel free to ask questions, but basically that's sort of how we did our pre-seed round.
Got it. So speaking about the DevTools space, right? So do you think that in this niche, or maybe just this niche, has some unique challenges, some unique opportunities compared to just just pure SaaS like solutions, something that investors are currently interested in, and that's why you saw this kind of interest from a bunch of investors?
I mean, there's a lot of things to add in there. So, I mean, if we look at the like investing market over the last year and a half when we were raising, it's getting way better now. Obviously, like interest rates are coming down and all these things. I think next year is going to be amazing, or at least better than last year. But DevTools specifically, I can get into why people invested, but DevTools specifically is kind of adjacent to AI. So right now you have the world of like SaaS, which is like meh, and then you have AI, which is like awesome, right? And so DevTools sort of like sits in the middle, closer to AI. So we don't we as a dev tool, and to be clear, when we started Code Anywhere, I went to investors. There was no dev tool market. It was not. So you have like e-commerce or whatever it may be, or health tech or whatever it might be.
Fintech, yeah.
There was no fintech, whatever, but there was no dev tools. It didn't exist. People didn't even know what it was. And then GitHub gets acquired, Atlassian IPOs, like, and dev tools starts becoming a thing. And so now you have like companies that invest in dev tools. And because AI is such a thing, there's so many developers, then dev tools is a bit interesting. So again, we can't get the valuations of an AI, but we're not punished like the rest of the SaaS industry. So it's like I feel that dev tools were basically floating on the same 2020, 21, 22 type of levels, which is great. It wasn't down. The other thing for us, which is really specific to us, was for Daytona, we also created Code Anywhere. Code Anywhere was basically the first browser-based IDE. Daytona is not that, but it's the infrastructure layer for that. That being said, we basically created the market. So we are quote unquote insane founders that are trying the same thing twice. That is very, very specific, right? And when I was thinking about leaving Infobip to do a new company, I actually wasn't thinking about doing DevTools ever again. It was like, I'm not doing DevTools. I'm done, right? And then we started getting inbound like interest from the market, and the market is interested. We did a bunch of reporting and surveys, and we found out that there is a hole in the market and we can uniquely serve it. And then when you go to investors and like, here's the data, like here's a bunch of data. We already have customers, we already have revenue, and we're these like insane people that are like spent a decade and a half doing this shit. Then they're like, you know what? Like the market seems to be there. DevTools is okay. This makes sense. And these guys are just idiots, or they're crazy, or they're great. And so that gives you, I think, gave us a specific opportunity. And that is when, you're creating a company. Like one investor told me this, and I really like this question. Is like, when you create a company, go out to raise or ask, like, then the investor should ask you, and you should ask yourself, like, what gives you the right to win at this? Like, you specifically, and so that could be anything, right? So it could be like a personal story. It could be something that happened in your family. It could be, whatever it is. It could be like your parents have like an auto shop, like their entire life, and you were around like engines, and now you're creating like a CAD tool for creating it. Like, it could be something.
More like on an emotional side of this, yeah.
Yeah. Like, why can you do that and no one else can do that? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Ivana, I still have a bunch of questions, but we're kind of running out of time. So probably my last one. No, there will be two. Are you planning to add this AI layer to your solution at some point?
So we're not going to be an AI interface layer for sure. Like there's so many AI coding agents. There's so many people working in that space. But what Daytona wants to do is be the infrastructure layer for these AI coding agents. So I wrote a huge article a couple weeks ago about the future of AI coding agents, sort of how I see it. Some things have changed, but I've distilled an idea about that. And so when we think about dev environments, a human developer basically needs one at a time, maybe two or three, in the sense of like, oh, I want to leave this running, but spin up something else. Fine. But an AI agent, you can think about, if an AI agent has to test out all the probabilities, and assuming that compute or cache for compute is not a constraint, you're going to want to spin up, 10, 20, 100, 1,000 in parallel to get to the outcome as fast as you can. And so that's how we're thinking about Daytona in the new world of AI.
Got it. And probably my last question, like real quick, can you maybe share like 3 key pieces of advice for founders who are like starting their fundraising journey in like 2024 or like in 2025?
So for fundraising, I just say that a lot of people, especially if they're constrained in their mind around geography. So like if you're people that I know in Croatia are like, oh, I just talked to Croatian investors, or what maybe in the region, Asians only in Asia. Even like there's like funds specific to New York or LA or whatever. And then like they talk to them first. And I have nothing against those funds. But if you're going to raise money, and especially if you're going for a global opportunity, you should find global investors. So those can be, American, Asian, European, but I would try the top of the top right away if you can.
Okay.
Like nothing stops you to cold email people and get things done. Also, on that note, a lot of people like, I just want to talk to the partner or the GP or whatever. Actually, in my experience, like principals are really, really good. I mean, analysts as well, but like principals, you can get to them much better. It's their job for deal flow. Reach out to them, email, like cold email as much as you can. Like have no shame in that. And cold LinkedIn, they will answer your question. They will answer your emails and get on calls as soon as you can.
Got it. Thank you very much, Ivan. This has been packed with valuable insights. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today.
Absolutely. It was so much joy. This passed in a second. So yeah, great.